So welcome, Niels. And I've forgone an introduction, but I'm just going to say a little bit about phenomenal conversation so that everybody understands what that's about. And that's really, I'm trying to cultivate in the public space a kind of heart to heart, soul to soul exchange between people on topics that can really change your life if you go fully into them. And one of the things that makes a phenomenal conversation is the quality of listening. So basically, if you've got a listener on listening to you, you hear yourself into being. So you hear more of yourself, more of your thoughts, and more of who you are comes to light when there's good listening. So I always encourage best possible listening in these spaces so that we can all participate in a larger, more worldly experience. So welcome, Niels, and thanks for agreeing to doing this. I'd say it's quite an edgy conversation because I don't know that much about it. And today is a kind of co-exploration for everybody. But why don't you say a little bit of your story of how you got into regenerative worlding, your journey of how you've come into that space.
Sure. Thank you, Dave. Just a quick note, I'm also still recovering from a cold, so I hope you can understand me well. Yeah, so the way I got into, regenerative worlding, as you said, I think it started when I was 14, 15, and really started to go into minimalist landscape photography. I think as a way for me to escape maybe the human realm of interactions and to be with and among the trees and to kind of frame them in a way that I think expresses their essence. Um, I must say, like, I didn't know this at the time. Like, I only found the language to describe what I was doing later, because in the moment I was just like all caught up in the act of photographing all these trees and just being with the elements. Um, I studied business later, which wasn't my main choice, but it allowed me to, tap into a different vocabulary and way of interacting with the world, I would say. And then worked for a mental wellness impact fund for a while, where I think really this idea of human health equals planetary health came in. I was maybe also a bit disappointed by the way that our society and our economy traditionally solves or tries to solve these issues by seeing it as, um, just like an independent phenomenon that we can just like, you throw an app at it and your mental health will get better, but it's so interconnected with everything else. And um, there is no health without planetary health. So I really started to look into that interconnection. Got a chance to participate in My Life Summer Research Institute on human Earth connection, and I really started developing for the company a visual identity that really shows the interconnection between mental well-being uh, and planetary health. So I think the
Niels,
fact
could I encourage you to speak up just a little bit
just
more
a
because
little bit more.
I'm
Okay.
worried about the quality of the recording and people hearing
All
you.
right.
So yeah,
Super. I will
apologies
do
for
my
your
best.
cold, but it will just record better.
Super. Yeah. Um, yeah, and I think that led me into, exploring communication design more. And together with my partner Ruta, who is here today as well, we started doing multi-species imagination workshops where we take people on an experiential journey into the experience of other living beings because we kind of, believe that part of why the world is as it is today is because of the separation between ourselves and other species. And through our imagination is really the first step towards a deeper connection with the rest of the web of life. Um, so we founded Sympoesis, which is also about um, creating together. It literally means that, which is an experience and design lab to really bring more of these experiences to people since the interest was really high, actually, to our surprise,
Mm.
and also design and create from this awareness that we are created by the countless other species. Our identities are so deeply interwoven. Yeah, and maybe last but not least, we are also co-founded Restory, which is also trying to do that by really bringing people together and imagine, okay, what are other ways of communicating, about telling stories, and how can we advance our role as communicators of the regenerative paradigm. So that's really about learning and co-creating.
So I'm going to just extend that thought a little bit. So yes. You're talking about changing the way that PR and comms interacts with the world. I think in a way, I wonder how regular businesses will interact, and it's almost so radical how regular businesses will respond. Or are you looking particularly at specific businesses that already have a connection to Earth? Where do you see that sector or the ecosystem where that kind of restoring comms can have its greatest, assist greatest, as it were?
Yeah. Thank you, Dave. That's a really good question. I think, yeah, there is a difference still between those that are maybe most ready for this and, you know, those who could benefit, although the language itself is a bit not right, from this, because what we're seeing is that there is definitely a lot more interest among people in communication roles and marketing roles to not, you know, follow traditional patterns of communicating that, you know, we might be familiar with, for example, how we communicate on social media, or like certain marketing strategies, you know, like focusing on pain points, agitating the pain, and then selling a solution and providing some testimonials for that. That's like, you know, the traditional way that we are taught to communicate. But nobody, I mean, until recently, very few people actually thought about, is this the only way that we can communicate? And is this, you know, improving our cause? Because maybe there's other ways that we can, you know, pull people into our world building projects. And from a regenerative lens, I think there's a lot more focus on potential, on the potential that's inherent in places, in systems, and really playing with the imagination. So to come back to your question, I think there is a growing interest in this. I think still from more of the pioneering organizations until now. But yeah, many businesses are also looking for different approaches that really know that things have to change, and it's not just changing the products first, but also changing the way we approach everything, including communications. But I'm happy to expand more.
I mean, I'll just make a comment and then we'll move on to the next issue. But there's something about fundamentally about communicating in that way that goes against the grain of kind of advocate, tell, sell, persuade, buy. You know, that's the kind of way that sector works generally. So you're pushing against the current in a way. But I also hear there are individuals in organizations that also want to change their practices. So that's also a good foothold with individuals that want to be more conscious and promote a story, an Earth first story, you might say, or ecosystem first story as part of their business ventures. So you've mentioned sympoesis. Now, it's not such a well-known term, and I know that you've done artwork, and you know of artists. So I'm hoping you can share with us what you think it means, or, I mean, the meaning is simple, but what the kind of consequences and implications are, and share with people in the audience so they can get a sense of, I would say, my sense of it's a more organic process than co-creation or, you know, other ways of making things together. So there's a kind of subtle difference in what sympoesis is attempting to do than pure co-creation or making and doing things together.
Yeah. Yeah, there's many ways to take that question. And I think I don't want to pretend like I know everything about it. It's also a relatively new concept, but the way I'm seeing it is that, as I said before, maybe just for context, it's a term coined by Donna Haraway, kind of in response to autopoiesis, in biology,
Yeah.
saying that everything creates itself. She kind of puts forward that, nothing really creates itself. Everything emerges from this web of relationships. It's the relationships that precede the individual. And that was really inspiring for us because to give you an example of the way I think it shows up for me, like my identity is so intertwined with my friends, my family, but also with the countless other species that I grew up with. I was fortunate enough to have a big garden with um, this beautiful American oak tree, and I think that's how you call it in English. But um, I realized looking back at it how much of my identity is shaped by that tree, how many of my childhood stories actually revolve around it. So that tree is not just, an traditional biology would say like an object, an independent object that just sits there, but it's like something co-creator of my own experience, of my own memories.
Okay.
And without it, I wouldn't be here. It allowed me to become more of myself. And I believe that I also play that role for that tree. So it's like this becoming with each
Okay.
other, with another is really at the core of what I think is Sympoesis. Um, yeah, our identities are constantly, created
Yeah.
alongside each other.
That's a beautiful example because the traditional worldview would have that as an object you study, not that
Mm.
something you're forming and shaping your identities together, although the tree may not have self-consciousness, as it were, but
Mm.
there's something in the relationship that both uh, phenomena are different because of the relationship.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I feel like this is also, I think I really loved um, um, Rebecca Solnit's work around this as well. How even our friends, they hold a mirror back to us, and without sometimes when a relationship ends, like a romantic relationship or a friendship, due to circumstances breaks up, it's also like part of us that we lose,
Yeah,
and that's because we are, she says, mirrors to each other, but also books. We write each other's stories in each other,
yeah.
and we're so profoundly interwoven that we often forget to think about it like that. And I think there's a lot of beauty in that. And I think we all long for this kind of more intimate way of relating to each other and the world around us. Even though I must say that also comes with, a deep level of vulnerability because, you know, my just briefly my mom mentioned maybe to move, that my dad wants to move back into the city. And I'm just like thinking, what if they have to sell the house and someone decides to cut down this tree?
Oh,
There
right.
comes, because that's part of myself that will then be lost. So I try not to think about this too much because I think,
Yeah.
or like try to get to a state of being where we can also have a radical acceptance for the reality that things, we might lose the people and the beings close to us. Because we have to go through that, especially now, when so many of the species and biodiversity loss is upon us, and we need to stay close and intimate with life while also relearning how to grieve and how to hold that reality.
I, I think you reminded me of John O'Donoghue wrote a poem about how our identities are formed upon our parents.
Mm.
And that basically, and I realized this experientially when my mum died, there was this massive gap in my being that I didn't realize she was holding me up. That part
Mm.
of my identity was held up by her existence. And then
Yeah.
when she died, there was a big hole there. And I wasn't
Mm.
aware of it how much my identity was enfolded in her identity. So I think that the way that we're conditioned to separate ourselves from relationships, we don't value how everything, the kind of relational nature of reality is. And I think that's what you're pointing to here.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
And I would generally also be curious, I love speaking with people about this and seeing, what are their stories of being and becoming that allow, that showed them maybe a deeper truth about how they're connected to everything and everyone around them. Yeah, and then we can start maybe also use this as an opener into more difficult conversations, right?
Yeah.
Like how we feel with the world. And yeah, I mean, yeah, and because like if you just switch on the news and see what the things that are happening everywhere in Gaza and stuff, and how that deeply affects you as well, and because we are separate, and there's so much politics trying to impose separation on people because it's easier to justify crimes, against people with all of the ways of separating that we create. And it's really sad, and it's part of it, but it's but it's, I hope that reflecting on this can also show our deeper connection as a humanity, as life on earth.
Sure. Yeah.
An open space for deeper conversation.
I was wondering, Niels, that you were wanting to share some of your art, and maybe you could talk through with people some of your art and what it is you're representing, and take them into that world of sympoetic creation through your art.
Yes. Let me share my screen. I put together a few pieces.
I think I'm going to unpin myself, and then it'll be easier.
Trying to find the window into this. Here, maybe. Oh, no. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
I'll just come back to that image later. Maybe I'll start with this one. Thing that's so there's this photo which I call tristesse, which means like, yeah, sadness in a way. It's taken in Belgium, in the south of Belgium in winter, and I think a lot of my photos revolve around trees that kind of maybe play with this idea and the opposite end of like the minimalism of a being perhaps being taken out of the context, and maybe the emotions that emerge from them. And maybe this image, just to clarify, I think, or to speak to it, I think also really reminded me a lot of the work of Andreas Weber, where he actually also talks about how other species, other living beings, they allow us also to experience ourselves differently because they embody a certain gesture, or birds sing a certain song that kind of allows us to make sense of our own human experience on this earth. So every this tree for me had a very specific way, a posture that reminded me of maybe a deeper sadness within myself at that moment. Which is also probably why I was so drawn to it.
I was also struck that as the American oak tree, as part of your family, this is a relative. Could easily be a relative of the oak tree.
Yeah. And through engaging with the world in this way, it kind of reveals deeper layers of my own being, right? Like it allows me to engage with different emotions and different aspects of what it also means to be alive. And yeah, it definitely, I got really a lot of responsive people who are people that bought this photo and then realized that it spoke to them really in a certain part of their lives, but then later they were like, no, I want something a bit more, joyful or something. So it's really, it speaks to us in a certain space and
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
let me just go. Yeah, and then this photo, I think I'm always really, um, I love the experience of awe and feeling small in the world that's so much larger than us. And so I would really always look out for rocks or sea stacks and trees and that are just so much bigger than us. And this one is in Madeira, in no, not in Funchal, Fanal, which is like this amazing place with these ancient huge trees that feel so, yeah, mystical. And I don't want to like over describe this because, it emerged from a certain feeling and I would like to, yeah, stay with that.
Mm.
Um, yeah. And I can show more photos if you like, but I think I also started doing collage art during COVID, um, because yeah, I was just mostly locked in the house in the flat, and I wanted to experiment with color. I felt like I needed more color in my life after doing years of black and white. Um, and I wanted to create worlds in which I would want to, even just momentarily escape into that are so flourishing and abundant. And I wanted to be, or at least mimic the feeling of being um, part of this larger ecology with so many species around. I mean, I wouldn't want to meet some of these gigantic beings in real life, maybe, but it's more, yeah, the experience of it and yeah, to create these worlds. Um, yeah, and in this one, I was actually
Gorgeous.
creating something for a client. This ended up not being a client bird because it didn't entirely fit. Sometimes I do these things where I like create something for a client and it's actually never, it was something that was still lingering inside my soul maybe for a longer time and then it just expresses and it's something else and that's fine too. That's part of the process, I think. But yeah, I think really it's a bit all over the place as you can see. It's inspired also by Bayo Kamalafi, I think,
Yeah,
who really talks about the monsters at the edge of the city. So I wanted to create this kind of weird monster looking uh, beings and also this duality between masculine and feminine and regeneration as that which emerges from that interplay between that
yeah,
um, and also you can see there is a heart and a brain to kind of show that what we are called to do is to really bring our heart with our brain into balance and in alignment and to make decisions from a place of harmony and balance where neither oh I would say neither dominates, but yeah, I think where they really go together. um yeah, and then you also see like um Bacon with his mechanical ducks lurking from behind the horizon, seeing how you know the world in part is burning, but also how something new emerges from the ashes of the smoke of the old. Yeah, so that's kind of the
well, now you've showed us the photos, and I'm interested just in how the process of creating a more regenerative world or is how much has your relationship to nature changed, or have you more or less uncovered what actually was there? So
Mm.
what has shifted
Yeah, that's a
for
good
you?
question. I think it deepened it. um
Yeah,
I must also mention, my partner Ruta is also here tonight, also definitely helped deepen it because she's
yeah.
very spiritually alive and connected. And the way she like, yeah, the way she's engaged with life is really beautiful and inspiring. That also allowed me to go deeper into that part of myself that was probably already there. And yeah, so I think it's part, growing up with, especially my mom's side. My granddad, he's like, I should have included a photo. Like he can just go out walking in nature and like look at the flowers. And, he said recently, like, or last year, if I can't like walk anymore, life wouldn't be as worthwhile anymore. And because he's just so deeply in connection with, he wants to smell every little blossoming flower. He wants to really indulge in life in this very connected way. So it's all, I think it's been there in my family, but it deepened as I got older, as I did camping trips, as
Beautiful.
I explored more through
And
mhm.
do you want to turn this, unless there's anything else you want to share? I've got a couple more questions, and then we can have the pause and go into your experience that you've brought for everybody.
Yeah. Would you like me to share some examples later, or some from
Ex
other
Examples of,
a few other artists, or
yeah, please do. Yeah, please share
yeah,
those. Yeah,
I will
why
I will
they illustrate this sympoiesis. That'll be good
yeah, I
to,
think they really do that well, and I will maybe pick out like one or two.
yeah,
And this is, by the way, another collage, but just not sure what's here. Um, yeah, maybe briefly. Ruta's artwork is really great, and I'm not sure if I'll do justice to it. She asked me if I could explain it, but I think she's working with mycelium, really seeing mycelium as a co-artist and co-creator of a sculpture. So this is just a prototype. The idea is to create a humanoid sculpture, so the size of a human being, to really, on one hand, expose something that grows subterranean, so
yeah,
linking that to the subconscious and making that conscious, but also as a way to show that sometimes healing is presented on society's terms. So to be healthy means to be a well-functioning individual within society, and to be a productive, unit of labor. But through this project, she hopes to question, when is our body, by being sick, maybe refusing to heal with on society's terms, and to really evolve into different notions of what it means to be a healthy living being.
yeah,
And through, so I'll leave it there. You can read
yeah.
more about it um, later. Do you have any questions for this, or should I just go?
I just have an observation. There's uh, a physician in the States that was given 10 years to live because she had a bowel illness that was supposed to be fatal. But actually, she retrained as a doctor's trainer, and she used the illness to train doctors to be healers. So that's a perfect
Mm,
example of somebody who had something incurable, but
mm,
used the illness as the source of her ability to
mm,
help doctors become healers, which is the reason they became a doctor in the first place. So that's a kind of
mm,
lovely inversion and illustration of Ruta's point there.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Um, yeah, maybe also shortly, I think this Gio Gutierrez, I think she's from Mexico. She made a mask that she sculpted this mask that she then later gave to the bees. And they made like really their own beautiful creation with this, and they kind of transformed it. So the artwork is not the mask, it's the result of this kind of multi-species collaboration with the bees that interestingly also like semi-disintegrated it. So it's kind of interesting to think about, a mask or that which you present to the outside world as being disintegrated by, the work of these bees, and you can question whether they knew what they were doing or whether they were just doing their thing and this was a byproduct of it. Yeah. um, and then a friend in Berlin, Claire Celeste, she's really making these like installations that people can walk into, sort of like a really a whole ecology that she created that is really thriving and flourishing, and it has all these, really focus on the relationships between the beings, and that people can immerse themselves in, and maybe have that feeling of what it's like to step into, a portal that takes you into a flourishing world.
Yeah.
So I really
Wasn't so long ago our gardens used to look like that.
yeah, and now we have
Maybe in
lawns.
my lifetime, but
And now we have lawns, yeah. Uh,
yeah, that's beautiful artwork.
yeah, I love it. And then last, Svenja Kuhne, she's doing a lot of work around multi-species design and working with textiles. So she created these, um, yeah, sort of installations outside of her home that would, um, I mean, I can show you. There's like, it's both beautiful and it also allows other species to like nest in it. So as you can see, this little, I think it's a cocoon that sort of nested in it.
Yeah.
Um, she describes it better, but I can't. And I took a note, but I can't see it. But I will happily provide some resources also later with the artist explanation, because I want to
That
do it
would be,
justice.
I'd love to do a follow-up with some of those details in. So it should people want to pursue it, they can know where to find it.
Yeah. So it's like all about, some poetic art, I think
Mm.
is co-creating with life, seeing yourself not as a sole artist, but part of a larger web of creation that creates beauty, and that creates beauty, functionality, that and new meaning, I think. Um, yeah.
Beautiful.
Cool.
I think thanks for sharing those images. They were really wonderful. I There's something about that last installations, as it were, is where the co-creation isn't merely for art's sake, and
Mm,
it's not merely a product of the human, but it's I'd say it's an artifact of what you're trying to encourage, this interspecies collaboration. So
mm,
the human element isn't the primary reason. The primary reason for the art, or to how can we co-create with nature? These are ways of exploring how that might occur. I mean, firstly through art, but then who knows if that might become something functional and useful to regenerate and restore ecosystems, because we've more sympathetic to other species and
yeah.
don't want to dominate them and get them out of the way to make our lives more convenient.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's and exactly, you got it really right. Like, I think it's often the arts, I think artists generally are the ones most sensitive to, shifts and currents, things that are moving in the world.
Yeah,
They go into places that are devoid of meaning, and go in there and really reconnect people to meaning, or to something that is meaningful in their lives, which we especially need in these times. But I think, yeah, what we're seeing now is like more artists experimenting with learning from nature as nature,
yeah,
uh, and finding ways to see, other species as collaborators.
yeah,
Because and I hope that really, that's also what we try to do with our workshops, is that it will
yeah,
spill over to other disciplines, right? To design, like no longer just building something purely, as you said, out of convenience for us as humans, or at least short-term convenience, because
yeah,
it's sort of also that whole logic is starting to unfold as we see today. But really starting to learn from nature and work alongside life rather than
yeah.
against it, or having to problem solve later, down the road, as we say in Dutch, um, to mop with the tap open. Yeah.